When it comes to leg day training for bodybuilding, most people often focus on the quadriceps to build that highly desired X-frame appearance from the front, and the glutes as a good centerpiece and muscle group to get lean to show a deep level of conditioning from the back. But a muscle group that's often neglected and is arguably just as, if not more important than both of the aforementioned muscle groups, is the hamstrings, which, when developed properly and sufficiently lean, benefits front posing by adding more overall leg mass to each pose, as well as side and back posing for the same reason, and it brings a beautiful level of aesthetic when properly conditioned. In fact, the hamstrings draw a huge amount of attention in both side and back poses, with athletes often looking incomplete if they're missing mass or conditioning in that area. So for this video, I'm going to outline the best hamstring training principles and show you which exercises, tempos, volumes, and all of that jazz help me most in building these massive, beefy hanging hammies. So stick around into the end of the video to see how to best apply all of this information into your own program for the absolute best results. Also, before we get started, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment on the video if you enjoy this type of content. For a small creator like me, all of these are a huge help in getting my channel and information out there to hopefully help as many people as possible also understand fitness better. So, starting with the anatomy, the hamstring contains 4 muscles. Starting most medially, we have the semimembranosus, and working more laterally, it's followed by the semitendinosus, biceps femoris long head, and the biceps femoris short head. Now, the semitendinosus, membranosus, and biceps femoris long head are all biarticular muscles, meaning they cross 2 joints and are directly involved in 2 main movements, namely hip extension, like in a Romanian deadlift, as well as knee flexion, like in a leg curl. However, the biceps femoris short head only crosses 1 joint, the knee joint, meaning its function is only to perform knee flexion. And now that we understand the anatomy and function of each of the hamstring muscles, we can move on to training variables that best hit these muscles and their functions. So moving on to exercise selection, we're going to select exercises based on how many of the following criteria they hit to theoretically optimize each exercise choice. First, it's enjoyability. Now, that is subjective, but there are some objective criteria that play into this, like how easy the exercise is to set up, how many machines or attachments it needs, how many other muscle groups are involved, as well as how much fatigue it generates. Second is stimulus, so basically how well it directly hits all the hamstrings functions, as well as its ability to add tension in the stretch position for our biarticular muscles, and then obviously compare that to, again, how much fatigue the exercise generates as well. Third is loadability or progressibility. Pretty self-explanatory here, how easy the exercise is to add reps or weight or both. And that's pretty much all there is to exercise selection. I mean, obviously there is more depending on the situation, but for muscle growth, those are the big 3 criteria I use when selecting exercises. So to give you guys an example of a hamstrings program I would run, I would give you guys a few examples of exercises I use in my own program to build these massive legs over the last few years. Starting with my favorite hamstrings compound, as I assume you guys probably already know if you've been watching my channel, is the Romanian deadlift, or more specifically, the deficit pause Romanian deadlift is my overall favorite hamstrings exercise. And the reason being because it, in my opinion, is a really enjoyable exercise. It's easy to set up. All you need is a barbell, weights, and optionally a platform if you need the extra deficit like I do. It's easily progressible. All you have to do is add reps, weight, or both for double progression week to week as you get better at the movement. And most importantly, the stimulus is one that no other hamstring exercise, at least in my experience, can really match. It works your hamstrings through its most stretched position and is one of the few hip extension exercises that feels as good and doesn't really rely on your lower back as much as most other hip extension exercises do. All that coupled with it usually being a heavy compound in the lower rep ranges, this exercise is easily my favorite leg day starter and has been the start to almost all my leg days for the past 3 to 4 plus years. Now, usually, as some of you might already know, I tend to work my muscles in a antagonist-protagonist fashion, meaning once I'm done an exercise that works a specific muscle group, like the chest, for example, my next exercise would be the opposite muscle group, so something on the back. And because of that, I will usually hit quads or glutes before moving on to another hamstring exercise. And lucky for you, I already have a quadriceps growth video ready for you guys to watch once you're done with this one. Then, moving on to our next hamstrings exercise, I'd incorporate something that instead of hitting hip extension again, hits knee flexion to really make sure I'm directly hitting both functions of the hamstrings, which is why I selected the seated hamstring curl, or more specifically, the stretched variation of the seated hamstring curl. For this exercise, I usually pull my torso as far forward as possible while keeping my butt as far back on the seat as possible to make sure I really feel a deep stretch on my hamstrings between each rep of the leg curl. Now, if you didn't already know, I'm clearly extremely flexible in this way, which is why I'm able to go so low on the Romanian deadlift and stretch my hamstrings so much in general. But for a lot of people, stretching your hamstrings to this degree safely under load might be a slight challenge. So I would recommend starting light and working your way up to a comfortable weight with this form, and little by little trying to see how much more flexibility you can build on these exercises over time. Now, some honorable mentions for the hamstrings would also be something like the glute ham raise and lying leg curl for the hamstrings, but admittedly, I don't really include these in my program given that glute ham raises are a pain to load, and the lying leg curl doesn't work your hamstrings through as deep a stretch. So since I hit legs twice a week, I often just repeat another variation of the RDL, like a Smith machine RDL or the belt squat RDL, for example, and then just hit the seated hamstring curl a second time. But if you guys did want to switch up your exercises, you can of course do the lying hamstring curl one of the days. It would switch up the stimulus and you'd probably be seeing pretty much the same, if not very similar growth. So if that's something you like, just switching up the exercises over each day of your leg workouts per week, that is of course something you can do and is perfectly valid. So now that we're done with exercise selection, it's time to move on to volume. For me, at the moment, I typically get 12 hamstring sets in per week. In other words, I hit 6 working sets 2 times a week, and that volume works great for me. But my general recommendation for you guys would be to get anywhere from 10 to 20 sets per week on your hamstrings, depending on how much of a priority they are to grow in your program, as well as how well you can recover from different volumes. For the most part, the most important training variable when it comes to growth is how hard you train. So train really hard for as many sets as you feel comfortable and can recover and grow from. And if over time the fatigue builds up too much week to week, you can of course add a deload week or 2 and change your volume from there until you find a nice volume sweet spot that you feel lets you train your hamstrings hardest and still recover and progress your best. So with all that information in mind, I hope this video helps you guys achieve some of the best hamstring growth you ever have. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you guys liked it, please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and do all that jazz to help a small creator get out there and help as many people grow as possible. Other than that, there are a few topics I covered in this video, like volume and the stretch, which I do have other videos on in my channel, so you could go check those out if you guys wanted a bit more of like a scientific deep dive into these topics, where I do actually cover full studies and give you guys a bit more explanation on everything. Other than that, I love you all so much, and I hope you all continue to tune in to all my future videos. Until then, I will be seeing you guys in the next one. Peace.